Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday, presented by Cinematic Visions. And the answer to the question is Boston. But maybe that's not really that accurate at all. The question, of course, is when I'm out here or I'm anywhere outside of Boston or New England, and people ask me where I'm from, I always say I'm from Boston. That's a far simpler answer than saying that you're from Framingham or that you're from Massachusetts or that you're from New England, but all of those things probably fit just a little bit better than saying that I'm from Boston. I'll explore that and my interesting and maybe rather strange relationship with sort of my home city of Boston, Massachusetts, when we continue next. It's Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday. It's presented by Cinematic Visions, and we're going to go on a little exploration of Boston, kinda, sorta. Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Visions' goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. I'm here with Tim Emerson, the owner of Emerson & Company. And Tim, give us an idea of the range of services that you provide from Emerson & Company.
At Emerson & Company, we do credit card processing, payroll services. We do bookkeeping, merchant accounts like point-of-sale systems.
What would you say differentiates you from other companies in the field, and what makes you special?
I think what makes us unique is that we're a small local business making regional decisions on companies. We create a profile for the business and then put it out to our different vendors in a very competitive environment and tailor those needs to the specific business, which usually ends up in a great fit or great result for the company.
And, of course, the idea is to save money, right?
Save money, and actually sometimes I'm surprised where actually a solution that may cost a little bit more ultimately does save money, but we're not conditioned to think like that sometimes.
Emerson & Company. Check them out at emerson-co.com or call them at 816-360-9092. It's time now to get some great assistance on healthcare with Chad Beisel from NoNonsenseHealthcareNinja.com. And Chad, even your business's name would indicate that you have a real aggressive way and an important way to go after some health insurance for your clients.
What I've found out in the industry is just a lot of people are really confused. They don't know what plans are good, what their plans offer, how they cover. And so I've just taken the approach of being really educated on what options are available to clients and showing them all the options that are available and making sure they understand them so they can pick and choose what options are good for them.
And one thing that's really important, of course, is access to doctors and hospitals.
Absolutely. That's becoming a big issue for a lot of people. Some of the plans out there are going to restrict those clients to where they can and cannot go. So if you live just outside the Kansas City metro, some of the counties outside, you may not be able to go to some of the hospitals up here in the Kansas City area. So making sure that you have a plan that's got doctors and hospitals and places you want to go is really, really important today.
Learn more by visiting NoNonsenseHealthcareNinja.com and let Chad help you. Most of us have experienced auto accidents, and it's no fun. And even less fun is trying to work on the insurance aspects afterwards and getting full value after an auto accident. I'm here with David Cowan from WreckExpert.com. And David, you have an unusual and important niche for people after an auto accident.
We have a passion to teach car wreck clients what they deserve. Getting your car repaired only fixes the damage and the paint. Getting paid for your car's loss in value is called diminished value. Chances are you've never heard of this before because most people aren't looking out for you. We help people collect thousands to tens of thousands of dollars for their car's loss in value after the wreck.
And if somebody wants to come to you for that, what's the original assessment cost them?
We offer a free review of any insurance claim to see how we can help.
You can't beat that. Great expertise and assistance in getting full value after an auto accident from David Cowan. Visit recexpert.com and learn more.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
I guess I have what could be described as an odd relationship with the city of Boston. There actually was a mayor of Boston once. His name was Kevin White, and he had an interesting speech pattern, and he used to describe his own city as the shitty of Boston. Well, I don't think he thought his city was shitty, perhaps, but that was just the way it came out. It's been a running joke in our family for a long time. But my odd relationship with Boston is couched in the fact that, well, I wasn't born there. I never lived there, and we didn't really even visit there that much when I was a kid. I was born in Brattleboro, Vermont, and I only lived there for 1 year, and I've never been back. And one time I was at the Final Four, and I asked Tom Brennan, who had once been the coach of the University of Vermont and was now a broadcaster, if he thought I should go back and visit Brattleboro. Was he familiar with it from his days of recruiting, etc.? And he said, "Oh, you don't need to go back there. It's a dump." Well, I don't know if it's a dump or not. I don't know if anybody from Brattleboro will listen to this. I don't know if I'll ever get back to Brattleboro, but that was indeed where I was born. I lived 1 year in Brattleboro. I lived 1 year in Bennington, Vermont. I lived another year in Haverhill, Massachusetts. I lived another year in Bradford, Massachusetts. And then I lived in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. And that was for at least, well, we settled down a lot there. My dad was going from job to job to job as a radio announcer. And we settled down in Hopkinton for 3 years. That seemed like a long stay. Of course, I really didn't remember much about the first couple of hops in my childhood, but I lived in a whole lot of places when I was very, very young. And then we moved, when I was about to enter the third grade, to Framingham, Massachusetts, which is a suburb about 18 miles or so outside of Boston. Boston is a very unique area from the standpoint of the fact that it's almost like a really small version of England, in the fact that there's a very dense population in a small area. It's different than England in the fact that it's almost all cozy little suburban communities that are rather small but densely populated. In fact, it is only 18 miles or so from Framingham to downtown Boston. You go right down the Turnpike, as it's called, the Mass Pike, and go past Fenway Park. In fact, right on the right of the Massachusetts Turnpike, you probably know you can actually hit a baseball onto the Turnpike from home plate at Fenway Park. And that's only 18 miles, and you probably pass through 12, 13, 14 communities on your way from Framingham to Boston. But indeed, it's not very far away. So it's an absolute suburb of Boston, and I guess saying that I'm from Boston is actually pretty accurate. But I really was born, raised, and basically spent almost my entire childhood in the house that my parents still live in. My father has now recently gone to a nursing home, but my mother still lives in that house. And it was a great place to grow up. It had a wonderful backyard. About half of that constituted some wooded areas. There was a big wooded area outside of our property, and so you could do things like pretend you were camping, even though you were 600 yards from home, and the yard was big enough to play full-blown baseball and football games. Eventually, it would be replaced. Part of it would be replaced by a swimming pool. That was after I went to college. I never got to enjoy the swimming pool when I was a young guy. But you know what? We probably had more fun being able to play those full football and baseball games there. So it was indeed a wonderful place to grow up. But we had a big family, and my dad often worked at nights. He was a television announcer, and obviously he had many jobs, but most of them were at night. Much of the time he was working 6 and 11 o'clock news, and then eventually he worked overnight because he did the morning news. So when we were growing up, we almost never ventured as a group into the city. We went to the beach, we went on vacation to Maine, we did things like that, but we didn't experience much of Boston. All my siblings and I are very close in age, so it was very difficult for us to do about anything. But when I was 13 years old, we would have 6 children ranging from 13 to 3, and maybe some friends or whatever, and going to the beach was an amazing adventure, often with, 10, 12, 14 people packed into a station wagon. And so going to the city, going to whatever city things you would do, like the museum or whatever, was something that was not really part of the itinerary. we ventured in there occasionally for a baseball game. When we got a little bit older, we could do that ourselves because there was a trolley station that was right next to Fenway Park. But as a family, we very seldom did anything in the city. I can remember going to a couple of theater productions, but most of the time I was just a suburban kid. So that is really why it was somewhat inaccurate to call me somebody who is from Boston. But most suburban people will describe themselves as being from Boston. You rooted for the Red Sox. I did till I was about 12 years old. My favorite baseball player when I was a little kid was Carl Yastrzemski, and I had great experiences following the 1967 Red Sox when I was just about to give up on being a Red Sox fan, became a National League fan and a Houston Astros fan. But growing up in that community was a wonderful way to grow up as a person, but it was hardly any kind of an urban experience. And as I said, the Boston experience of that time was really kind of peripheral. It was based maybe on the sports, Carl Yastrzemski, Bobby Orr, all kinds of things like that. It was, however, also a great community to enjoy the benefits of going to a great school system. And one of my biggest influences in my entire life was my sixth grade teacher, Miss Rubin Witch, who was a first-year teacher. I had a crush on her, but I also admired her very much. She'd been a freedom rider. She did the March on Washington. She was really somebody who influenced me in a tremendous amount of ways. So this was a suburban existence, not a city existence. We had all kinds of fun things to do. Right up the street from us was fenced off a aqueduct which carried water to all of this community, and it served as a gigantic slide in the winter, a long place where you could sled maybe for a quarter of a mile, perfect for tobogganing and things like that. Lots of interesting and fun things to do as a youngster, but not as a youngster who grew up in Boston. There are a lot of things about Boston that I eventually would know that I wouldn't really have much affection for or want any association with whatsoever. The racial climate in Boston was not particularly good during the time I was growing up. They had serious issues with school busing. My father once was hit by a brick during a demonstration when he was covering it for television. So the racial atmosphere in that city was not particularly good. I remember in high school one time my father was going to receive what was called the D in Life. He had gone to Dorchester High School, and 25 years after graduation, each year they would name a distinguished person to get the D in Life award. Rose Kennedy won it, the comedian Norm Crosby, who many of you probably haven't even heard of. People like that had won, but Rose Kennedy certainly almost everybody has heard of. And my father got to the point, being on television and everything, where they decided that he was famous enough to be given the D in Life award, and we went to Dorchester High School, which was almost entirely African-American at that point in time. And they had an assembly, and Bob Clinkscale got up there, and nobody was really very interested in that, but it just showed the racial disharmony that was there and what school busing was going to eventually try to eradicate by integrating the schools. So a lot of things about Boston at that time were not things that I would have embraced in any way, shape, or form. I was very interested in the politics of Martin Luther King and things like that. And so it was a suburban existence and not a Boston existence. Went to high school, Framingham North High School, had a good time there, spent a lot of time at television stations that my dad was working at. That was a city experience, although the eventual television station they worked at was, ironically enough, in the suburbs in Needham, Massachusetts. But WBZ-TV was in the city right next to Harvard University, and WHDH-TV was also very, very close to that as well. So there are a lot of experiences. Those are about the only experience I had that were actually going into the city, going to work with my dad, going to a baseball game, maybe going to an occasional theatrical production in downtown Boston. Interestingly enough, after this particular childhood, where I would experience being born in Vermont, vacationing often really in May, had cousins who lived in New Hampshire, I lived in suburban Framingham, this all had nothing to do with Boston. I guess that's sort of what inspired the fact that I thought of doing this particular piece on Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday. A couple other things that I just heard a couple songs the other day in a store by the band Boston. And, of course, Boston has produced many big-time famous bands, a couple of which are among my favorites. Boston's not necessarily one of them, but the Cars certainly are. Aerosmith certainly is. And It's known as a very progressive and interesting musical city. It also obviously has a tremendous amount of great universities in it. I remember when I was young going to a Red Sox game one time, and this was in the early to mid-'60s, and we would drive and try to find some place to park to go to Fenway Park, and we would be in an area that was almost all university students' housing or apartments or whatever, and the streets were lined with one Volkswagen Beetle after another. I guess during the early 60s, it was one of the most affordable new cars you could get, so I think some of these students who were being sent off from places all over the country, usually fairly well-to-do people, got high school graduation, off to go to Harvard or Boston University or Boston College or dozens of really good smaller schools in the city of Boston, and I guess you'd get a car. Here you go, high school diploma, you're going to go to college in Boston, here's your Volkswagen Beetle. And literally, you see 2 blocks up down the street, and every single parking space was filled with a Volkswagen Beetle. Would I go to high school? Would I end up going to college in Boston? No. First of all, most of those schools wouldn't have had me. Secondly, I did want to go away to school, and that's the interesting part about my adult relationship with Boston, is the fact that as an adult, I have spent far, far more time away from Boston and the East Coast than I have in the East Coast. And I did want to get away to college, and eventually it ended up choosing the University of Kansas. So my time in Boston, quote unquote, was about to come to an end, but I would experience more of Boston in the time I was always away from Boston than in the time when I, quote unquote, lived in Boston. There's a lot of great things there, but I would experience them more on visits than I ever did as a young person, and that's what we'll visit with next. It's a personal Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday presented by Cinematic Visions about the city of Boston.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
I'm here with Joe Spiker, owner of Easton Roofing, and boy, we had to negotiate a million things in 2020, but Easton Roofing navigated them all. As 2021 rolls out, what should we expect this coming storm season?
Well, Danny, it'll be the same thing as it is every year. The storms come, and you've got the guys out knocking on doors offering quote-unquote free inspections. Be wary as a homeowner. If somebody's knocking on your door, they probably need the work, and if they need the work that bad, they may be willing to do something untoward to get it. So if somebody knocks on your door, says they want to give you a free inspection, just tell them have a great day and give us a call. We'll come out for free and give you a good, honest opinion as to whether or not you need to do anything at all with your roof.
And what's the best way to get in touch with Easton Roofing?
You can always find us online at eastonroofing.com or give us a call at 913-257-5426.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters. It's time to visit once again with Dr. Brad Woodle of Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. And Dr. Brad, your group has reached a significant milestone in receiving a prestigious award.
Danny, we've been honored for the 10th year in a row to receive the 5-Star Service Award from Integrity Doctors. And what this means is that all of our offices throughout Kansas City have made sure to give people excellent chiropractic and acupuncture care, be on time, and do a very complete and thorough job, and have great responses back from patients.
I know firsthand because I was just treated, for instance, today by you. You have a wide range of fantastic services.
Absolutely. Chiropractic, acupuncture, physiotherapies, rehab, anything that you need to keep you well in bones, muscles, joints, and nerves.
And I can't say how much it's benefited me in the time I've coming here, upwards of 2 years. My back has improved 100%. And you can have that same kind of treatment too. For more information and your chance for a healthier way of life, visit asfca.com/Danny today.
Hi, everybody. This is Matt Llewellyn from 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. I just want to thank everybody for supporting local restaurants during this time of uncertainty. 23rd Street Brewery is now open until this pandemic is over. And right now, more than anything, local restaurants need your help and support. Come on out and see us. 23rd Street Brewery is open now from 11:30 till 9 o'clock for dine-in and carry-out. Whatever we can do to help you out, maybe with your catering needs, too. I appreciate all the support, and thank you for continuing to shop local.
Firsthand, I have enjoyed the benefits of the CBD products from Canaway. My back feels better and better these days, as a major part of my routine are the pain-relieving salve and the Pure Gold oil. And recently I had the pleasure of a treatment session using the Canaway CBD in conjunction with the Microlite 830 cold laser. The non-invasive treatment session worked wonders, and I could barely tell I was even being touched. TML-830 is the first 3B cold laser to get FDA approval, and in addition, the combination treatment with CBD is patent pending. The new smart laser is the only hands-free cold laser in the world and is used by athletic trainers, chiropractors, MDs, physical therapists, and veterinarians everywhere. You can learn more about all the great benefits from the complete line of Canaway CBD products by contacting my friend Sherry McCants at 515-208-6312. That's 515-208-6312 to get outstanding information about Canaway. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Welcome back, and yes, it was time to go to college, and I decided on the University of Kansas. I wanted to go to a big state school where they would play sports, and I would start my broadcasting career, as it were, by broadcasting on the student radio station wherever I was going to go, and I wanted to have big-time sports to talk about, with one exception. The 5 schools that I actually applied to were the University of Georgia, the University of Iowa, the University of Kansas, Washington State University, and the University of Idaho. Georgia wanted to put me in advanced placement because I had 2 good test scores. I didn't want to work that hard. Washington State wouldn't have me because although I did have good test scores, I didn't have good grades in high school, and they didn't want me for that particular reason. But all along it seemed like Kansas was the favorite along with Idaho. And if Idaho had been, say, in the Pac-10 back then, or I don't even know if it was the Pac-8 back then, might have been, then I might have gone to the University of Idaho. You're just doing things on brochures at that point in time. And so eventually I did settle on the University of Kansas. Why would I have wanted to get away to a place like Kansas? I don't know. I thought it would be different. I thought it would be a change of a young person's life from a suburban existence to maybe a more Midwestern existence. I didn't realize that Lawrence and the University of Kansas would really end up having far more similarities to the area that I was from than I ever would have realized, but I ended up going there and liked it very, very much. But my relationship with Boston then was about to be almost disenfranchised. I was a very, very big hockey fan during the time of Bobby Orr and the Big Bad Bruins, and you go out to the Midwest and there's virtually no hockey. So while I still enjoy hockey, I really haven't had it in my life on a daily basis for a long, long time. And the Boston Bruins are the only Boston team that I still really root for, and that has been the case for quite a long time, too, and I don't watch that much hockey, so for me to even say that I'm a Boston Bruins fan probably isn't even that accurate. I didn't go back home very often at all when I was in college, not even Thanksgiving, maybe at Christmas. I was at the University of Kansas off and on for quite a while, and eventually would go back and start working in radio in Marlborough, Massachusetts, a little place outside of, well, it was 2 towns over, as I talked about before, from Framingham. That was while I was still trying to finish college, and then eventually I would go after graduation from the University of Kansas for the shortish stint that I would live back in the Boston area. My first job out of college was at WMRC in Milford, Massachusetts, and it is an interesting story that relates to Boston directly. One thing about Boston is everybody knows the accent, and they imitate it, sometimes very badly, sometimes very well. The old Saturday Night Live skit with Jimmy Fallon, and I can't remember which one of the female performers played his girlfriend. That was an incredibly well-done accent, very accurate, not over the top even. The skits seemed like they were over the top, but the accent was in no way over the top. The Boston accent is not a particularly good one in my mind, and Milford eventually would provide a really interesting story about the Boston accent. I did the American Legion games in Milford for my first job. It was a very popular place for American Legion baseball. They would draw crowds of 1,500 to 2,000, sometimes even more, and I very much enjoyed it. It was a good part of my development as a play-by-play announcer. But many, many years later, at the during the 2014 playoffs, Chris Colabello played for the Toronto Blue Jays. And I saw in his biographical information that he was born in Framingham, Massachusetts. So I figured, hey, I get access to the clubhouse. I got a little connection with Chris Colabello here. I'll go talk to him and say that I'm from Framingham, too. And so I did. Turns out that he actually never lived in Framingham, but the the Framingham Union Hospital sort of served the communities around that. And even though he was from Milford, Massachusetts, he was born at Framingham Union Hospital. So that's what he listed as his birthplace, because it was. Anyway, I talked to him, and I noticed that he had no Boston accent whatsoever. And I said to him, hey, what's up with the fact that you don't have a Boston accent? He goes, well, you don't have one either. I said, well, I'm a broadcaster. My dad was a broadcaster. It was part of my professional preparation that I was not going to have a Boston accent. And I said, what about you? And he says, I always hated that blanking accent. And when I come back and visit my friends in Milford or Boston or any place else, I give them crap about it all the time and make fun of them for having such a stupid accent. Maybe the only worse accent on the East Coast to a Boston accent, when it's an exaggerated one, is a Providence accent, which is sort of a combination between a New York accent and a Boston accent, with a little, Philadelphia thrown in, perhaps. But anyway, that doesn't make even a lawyer or anybody else sound particularly articulate when you're toting a Providence accent. But anyway, all the members of my family still have somewhat not thick accents, but they do have Boston accents. I don't have much of one at all. My wife does say that when I say the word sorry or worry, she notices my accent. I don't know. I just said those words. Maybe that rings true to you. I mentioned before that many of my Boston experiences that would be more like a person who grew up in the Boston area really came when I would go back and visit Boston. One of my favorite areas to sit and people watch and have a beer or whatever is Quincy Market at Faneuil Hall, right next to the ocean in downtown Boston, right next to the place where they signed the Declaration of Independence. As a matter of fact, it's kind of a touristy area. It's not kind of a touristy area. It's a very touristy area, but I still enjoy it very much. And I go there. I've been to the JFK Museum, which I can highly recommend myriad times, even though I know each and every time I go to that museum, I will end up crying during the introductory film, mostly with its association to Bobby Kennedy, who was somebody who had a great influence in my life before his assassination. And my teacher, Miss Rubinwich, allowed me to watch coverage of that when we should have known that Robert Kennedy basically had no chance to survive the shooting by Sirhan Sirhan, but she knew that I cared, took me out of class, allowed me to watch some of the coverage of that. It was just one of the things that made me very emotional about her and have such a great attachment to her. And right here in my office, I'm looking up at a painting that she did of a seaport. I think it's Newburyport, but I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly, but it's on the North Shore, and it's a beautiful little painting. And we still keep in touch to this day. Actually, we weren't in touch for probably, 15 or 20 years. And guess what? On Facebook, we sort of reconnected about a decade and a half ago, and we have stayed in very close touch from that time forward. And I devoted an entire chapter of my book, basically, to her effect on me. She was a very, very influential person in my life, and she wasn't really that much of a connection to the Kennedys for me. My dad, actually, as a television announcer, had spent time playing tag football with the Kennedys at times as well. And he's one of those people that probably know kind of well, when he's young, and when he's a young man, he's a very liberal person and was a Kennedy liberal. And as he grew older, much to my consternation, he became a very, very conservative person, and probably at that point in time wouldn't want to have anything to do with the Kennedys. But he did get to play touch football at Hyannis, so that was a story we can always tell, a Boston story, as it were. There are wonderful things about every community. I rave to anybody who will listen outside of this area about how beautiful the Kansas sunsets are. And maybe it's the fact that I basically never saw sunsets when I grew up. There's wonderful things about the suburban areas around Boston, these beautiful wooded communities of Concord and Lexington and Framingham and all these other places. But they are somewhat hilly. There's trees all over the place, and you really never saw the sun go down. It would probably be an hour and a half before sunset, and you really couldn't see the sun anymore. In fact, in many places in the Boston area, when you're just driving down these beautiful back roads, you can't even look up and see the sky, basically, because there's an envelope of trees over it, and it really is one of the most wonderful parts of that part of the world. partially because I heard the songs and partially because there's been a lot of activities going on in my family that have made me think a lot about Boston. My brother just hurt his knee. One of my brothers just hurt his knee rather severely. My sister just hurt her thumb playing ultimate Frisbee. Pretty amazing young lady. My younger of two sisters, she's in her early 50s, and she was playing ultimate Frisbee, if you can imagine that. She likes to stay incredibly active, and joined up with this group of people who play ultimate Frisbee at lunchtime and on the weekends, and many of them very, very much younger than she is, but she's a great athlete and a wonderful participant in those type of things. But she got hurt. My dad now is in a nursing home, so we have all kinds of health updates about that. One of my brothers writes a lot of music and puts it out, and often shows things of him performing at little places around the Rhode Island area, which isn't very far from Boston either. So all these things kind of got me thinking about Boston and thinking about the fact that question comes up often to me. Where are you from? And I say, I'm from Boston. When you're from, Natick, or where Doug Flutie's from, or Framingham, or Dover, or any of those places, you're really not very far from Boston. You root for the teams, and in fact, I guess you sort of really are from Boston. It is a great city. I know most people have visited it. Fenway Park, to me, is the greatest ballpark in America. I'm not a Red Sox fan, so I think I can say that with being pretty impartial about the whole thing. It's an amazing atmosphere there. The city is incredibly small geographically, so it's easy to get around on. It's a great place to find some history and tourism, and it's right on the sea, and there's great museums. There's all kinds of great things about Boston that I did not experience when I was younger, that I got to experience through the years. And Boston is one of my favorite American cities. Probably not my favorite. If I was going to take one visit for a week, if I could only go to one American city, it's probably still going to be New York, because Broadway shows are there and things like that. Love Chicago, but certainly Boston is a great place, and many people find it maybe the most easy big city to maneuver around in. I don't know if these thoughts about Boston resonate with people, but I get to do a podcast that gets to be very personal, and on this Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday, I just thought of the fact that the answer to the question is always Boston, even if it maybe shouldn't be.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like
Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.